Tara was my next door neighbor. I moved into the apartment right next to her, and we became close at that time. And she told me about it when we were having a conversation. And so, as Rich put forth in the article in the Business Insider, I was having a moment I was outside, and I had just received some papers, and I was upset about them. And she came over, and we were talking about violence, because I had experienced violence myself. And she started telling me about Joe Biden and what he had done. And basically, she told me that he put her up against a wall, and he put his hand up her skirt, and he put his fingers inside her. And she was very distraught, and she was very upset, and she was crying. And that's how that conversation happened.
This is Tara Reade's neighbor, Linda Lacasse. I may be pronouncing the last name wrong, but it may be Lacasse or Lacasse. She came forward and said, look, Reade told me about this around the time that it happened. We've had two additional people, according to the AP, to come forward, making basically the same claim. The AP has also spoken to two additional people who spoke on condition of anonymity to protect their family's privacy, who said Reade had told them about aspects of the allegation against Biden years ago. One friend who knew Reade in 1993 said Reade told them about the alleged assault when it happened. The second friend met Reade more than a decade after the alleged incident and confirmed that Reade had a conversation with a friend in 2007 or 2008 about experiencing sexual harassment from Biden while working in the Senate office. The point that a lot of people are trying to make here, people who are not Democrats, is that you guys went whole hog on this notion for Ford and Kavanaugh. And between Ford and between Reade, she has a lot more corroborating evidence in regards to her mom calling in the king, the sources that come forward, not just the anonymous sources that recently came forward, but the people who came forward. Joe Biden has a track record of lying. And you also have this history of essentially inappropriate contact with women, either sniffing hair or putting his hands on people who didn't necessarily want to be felt up. Stacey Abrams, who is pushing for the VP pick right now, gets on CNN and in the pursuit of making this argument for Joe Biden, because again, she's a surrogate and she's one of these women who is pushing for this VP spot. She's basically putting out a talking point argument that the Biden campaign has been passing around, meaning they've just transitioned into another argument. But this argument beforehand, when it first came out, was basically the New York Times has corroborated our story. And in the New York Times kind of showing that there was nothing to this, I trust Joe. I believe Joe. Everybody knows who Joe Biden is. I believe Joe. Now, this is transition to where Obama didn't find anything, so I trust Obama. We don't need an investigation. That's the new item that they're using. But beforehand, they were trying to use the New York Times as a way of downplaying this issue. Now, the mainstream media, for the most part, didn't cover it, but there were a few things that happened that created so much shame and looked like media malpractice for them not covering this issue that they were somewhat forced into it. You had multiple people coming forward and multiple corroborating evidence, or multiple sources of corroborating evidence. The Larry King video, not to mention the woman who just came forward. And so that created that much more tension on this issue and made it that much more weirder that the media wasn't covering this issue, especially in the context of the way they covered Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh was going to be put on the Supreme Court. Biden is running for president of the United States. And again, Reade has more corroborating evidence. So you would think that there would be some kind of corresponding media inquiry into this, but for like a year, media didn't care about this particular story. Well, now all of it is hitting the fan all at once, and the Biden campaign and media is basically playing catch up on this story. Joe Biden, Chris Hayes on MSNBC covered the story first for MSNBC, meaning he was the show that finally took that step. After he took that step, you had another situation where Joe Biden finally comes out and says, okay, I'll do an interview, in which case he ends up on Mika. If I am not mistaken, before that happened, though, Abrams went on CNN and debased herself, fundamentally lying and giving the talking points that Joe Biden had been handing out to the campaign. I suppose that when CNN and New York Times busted her on this, the Biden campaign had a rethink in regards to the strategy that they wanted to employ, especially since these talking points went bust. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, subscribe. You can always support PayPal, Patron. So Abrams embarrassed herself on this, but a few things happened. Joe Biden said he's going to pick a woman. Well, that's kind of weird since many of the women that you're going to pick were extremely outspoken on the Kavanaugh. How do you allow those women to not look hypocritical by backing you, but going after Kavanaugh whole hog? You also have this other weirdness where this particular story, once the story got crushed, well, they pivoted. They needed another way to explain, they needed another way to excuse, and they needed another way to talk about this in order to get them from point A to point B and justify Biden remaining in this race. All of them basically have to say, we believe Biden, because it gets a little bit weird if you say, I believe Biden, however, I'm still going to back Joe Biden. I don't believe Biden, but I'm still going to back him. Let's take a look at Abrams' video. CNN lying. Outright, entirely lying for Joe Biden.
Allegation against Joe Biden. The accuser, her name is Tara Reid, tells CNN that the alleged incident happened in 1993 while she was working as an aide in Biden's Senate office. She is claiming that she was delivering Biden a duffel bag and says that Biden had her up against the wall in a corridor on the Hill and violated her with his fingers. Now, CNN has now spoken on the record with her former neighbor, who says Reid told her about the allegation within a few years of the alleged incident. Biden's campaign says untrue, never happened. Is this a credible allegation?
I believe that women deserve to be heard, and I believe that they need to be listened to. But I also believe that those allegations have to be investigated by credible sources. The New York Times did a deep investigation, and they found that the accusation was not credible. I believe Joe Biden.
All right. There need to be an investigation by credible sources. Okay. Well, there should be an investigation, right? I mean, this notion that we're going to believe women, but we're not necessarily going to do anything about that belief is a little strange. Looks like you were trying to get to the bottom of it, especially if somebody is running for president. Tom Perez had basically come out today and said, yeah, there's not going to be an investigation. Obama did an investigation of Biden, didn't see anything wrong there. So yeah, we're not going to have an investigation on this particular issue. I believe Joe Biden. We believe women, but no, we don't necessarily want to do anything about it when this comes up. Now, the reality of it is the New York Times, that lie was so over the top that the New York Times put this out. Biden campaign talking points inaccurately suggest the New York Times investigation found that Tara Reid's allegations did not happen. Our investigation made no such conclusion. New York Times response to this quote-unquote scoop. CNN, Joe Biden's campaign in twisting New York Times story to defend against Tara Reid allegations. The bolded section about the New York Times finding the Reid accusation was quote-unquote not credible comes directly from talking points being distributed by Biden's campaign. Talking points first reported on BuzzFeed's Rudy Kramer. Here's the specific language of Biden's talking points. Biden believes that all women have the right to be heard and that their claims thoroughly reviewed. In this case, a thorough review by the New York Times has led to the truth this incident did not happen. That's almost verbatim what Abrams said. It's also not accurate that the New York Times piece that Abrams referenced, that lemon on Tuesday night, at which Biden campaign's talking points lean heavily on, does not in fact find that Reid's accusation is either not credible or the accusation didn't happen. The point is, they're making the case of saying, look, what Abrams said there is wrong. The New York Times did not find what Abrams just said, which means that the talking points that Joe Biden was running with, that Abrams just kind of repeated almost verbatim, were lies. They were lies. So if you get busted in a major lie like that, what do? Are you going to keep repeating the exact same lie and drawing criticism, or are you going to come up with a new way to dodge? Their idea was to come up with a new way to dodge. Joe Biden had to answer the questions directly on Mika, and then following up with this notion of, well, why won't you have an investigation? because Obama did an investigation and everybody loves Obama, and Obama didn't find anything. That investigation was totally thorough. So we don't need to investigate Joe Biden. We still believe Joe Biden. Meaning all of this stuff just boils down to we don't want to change the pony of this race. And we need to come up with some reason, justification, or excuse to either vote for Joe Biden or at the very least to believe that Joe Biden is a lesser evil among quote unquote rapists, if you want to look at it in those terms. They just want to get Joe Biden over the finish line. My point to them would be it would be that much harder to get Joe Biden on the finish line as you suppress the vote by having somebody who's on the ballot that is being accused of an assault. And all of the stuff that the Democratic Party has to do. I mean, these were the guys that was pushing or that co-opted the Me Too movement. And now, within a year or two, all of a sudden they're willing to burn that movement to the ground in order to get Joe Biden over the finish line. The stuff they have been saying about this woman has been utterly atrocious. These kind of Biden bros that have been out there attacking her. Like, it's hard to get across some of the stuff that they have been saying. It's been utterly disgusting. And I'm sorry, Abrams completely debases herself by coming out and making this very particular lie in pursuit of Joe Biden's campaign. And guess what? You will not be vice president. Joe Biden is not going to choose you for vice president. Just saying. Like, share, subscribe. I'll see you guys in a few minutes.